Can we quickly go over to Ukraine for another round of Mike was right?
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. But your name wanna start changing your ways. Change.
Russia punches through weakened lines in eastern Ukraine. Military analysts say Russian forces are increasingly investigating Ukrainian lines to identify weakened positions before attacking and breaking through. Russian forces have made rapid gains in eastern Donetsk region over the past week or so, capturing a few villages and closing in on the city of Pokrovsk, one of the main Ukrainian defensive strongholds in the area. Russian forces are now only a few dozen miles from Pokrovsk. I don't know how to say these Russian names. After Moscow's troops pushed along a railway line, it advanced about 3 miles toward the city, according to open source maps of the battlefield based on combat footage and satellite imagery. The Russian progress contrasts sharply with the slow but steady gains that Moscow had made so far this year in the Donetsk region, sometimes measured at only a few hundred yards a week. Military analysts say the swift gains reflect Moscow's improved ability to exploit cracks in Ukrainian defensive lines, which have been thinned by manpower shortages and strained by relentless Russian attacks along a more than 600-mile front. In recent months, the experts say, Russian forces have increasingly focused on identifying weakened and poorly organized Ukrainian units before breaking through by throwing scores of troops and armored vehicles onto the battlefield. Russians probe the lines to see if a battalion holds or retreats. Once they find weakened battalions and brigades, he added, they press them no matter the losses. An example was Russia's capture last week of the eastern village of Porohies. Deep State, an analytical group with close ties to Ukraine's army, said the capture followed what it described as a chaotic Ukrainian retreat, as soldiers north of the village were encircled by the Russians and escaped only after the troops ignored their commander's order not to break out of the encirclement. The hasty retreat appears to have allowed Russian forces to quickly capture more land. Since the fall of Porohies, they have seized more than 10 square miles of territory, according to Deep State's battlefield map. And what's happening, chat, and this is what Mike was right about, is the Ukrainians are out of troops. They've lost so many men that they're out of troops. And so the Russians are now just able to break free because the attrition is ending. The Ukrainians don't have any more people. They've all been killed. And this is the situation right now in Ukraine. Ukraine is conscripting thousands more troops, but are they ready? Large numbers of recruits will arrive at the front in the coming weeks, soldiers and military analysts said, but some are poorly trained or out of shape. In other words, these are people that were not prepared. They didn't get a full basic training. They weren't able to, get calisthenics and physically train and get in shape if you were out of shape, right? They throw you through a very short training period, too short for you to actually get into combat physical shape, and throw them on the lines because they're out of guys. How do you think this is going to work out? And the reason why they're doing this is because the Russians are just breaking free, and they're breaking through, and they don't have the troops. But don't worry, chat. The Wunderwaffe is arriving. As F-16s arrive, Ukraine still faces steep challenges in the skies. Wait a minute, chat. I thought the F-16 was going to dominate the Russians in the skies, and they were going to shoot them all down with American super planes. Now, listen. I'm a pilot, yes. Both my father and grandfather were combat pilots, and my dad was a fighter pilot, and I was born on Eglin Air Force Base. And, I literally have been around fighter jets my entire life. What do I know? But you can compare me to, other people, I guess. The only people that I would think are more qualified in this area to talk about this that are streamers are people who are literally fighter pilots in the Air Force. But anyway, moving on. The F-16 is an inferior aircraft. It's not good in modern combat. It is a third generation fighter, and it's old. It's old. Like you could say, or I think it's probably more fair to say it's an early fourth generation fighter. Basically, They created the F-16 because they wanted a cheap single-engine plane. And here's the problem with the F-16, is that it's a multi-role fighter, which sounds good. But here's the problem with it. When you're fighting other planes in air-to-air combat, the F-16 is inferior if it's also trying to do a multi-role by, like, you know, carrying a lot of bombs. It's underpowered. It's not very maneuverable. Now, if you slick it down and you know, have it just running on internal fuel and no external fuel tanks and no missiles, then it's very maneuverable and it's a good dogfighter. But if you actually put bombs on the fucking thing, then it's inferior. And the F-16s cannot stand up to modern Russian 5th generation and 4th generation fighters. They're inferior. So the idea that the F-16 is going to go toe-to-toe with Russia and it's going to result in the Ukrainians ruling the skies is nonsense. Also, the Russians have relatively decent anti-air equipment. So for the F-16s to challenge, and the way that, and this is why this is important, because tactically what the Russians are doing is they are using glide bombs. So they're not flying over, you know, Ukrainian lines and Ukrainian anti-air and dropping bombs. They are gliding them in. They're launching them. They're gliding the bombs in from behind Russian lines and behind Russian anti-air. So the F-16s to challenge them are going to need to put themselves in a vulnerable position. And as I said before, it's not a good plane. The United States, we use the F-22 for air dominance. Okay? We use the F-15C, which is specialized for air-to-air combat. We try not to use F-16s in air-to-air roles because it's not a very good plane. The reason why it's popular is because the Air Force was trying to sell it. So to sell it to every Generalissimo chimichanga, they had the Thunderbirds in the F-16. They put it into video games. But as far as, like, it is the cheap product we sell. It's not the premium product that actually dominates the battlefield. That's the F-15. That's the F-22. So Ukraine getting some old F-16s, it's not going to change shit. Russia has like 25 generation fighters. Most air-to-air combat takes place at long range with missiles. Dogfighting is less important in modern combat. Absolutely. And the F-16 is a radar. Is a radar. It's a huge radar klaxon. It's not a stealth plane. It doesn't even have limited stealth like the F-8, the modern Super Hornets do. The Super Hornets have like reduced radar signatures when you're seeing them head on. F-16 is just like, shoot me down, please. Everybody was talking about how the M1 Abrams was going to make a difference. They got exploded. Everyone was talking about how the long-range missiles being able to fire into Russia was going to make a difference. Didn't make a difference. Everybody was saying how, oh, look at the drones and the, oh, look, that's going to make a difference. That didn't make a difference. I told you that the fascist belief in Wunderwaffe is a failed strategy. That war is about logistics. War is about big numbers and high-level strategic realities. And Ukraine is inferior to Russia in what matters: manpower, economic size, military industrial complex. Ukraine relies on the gifts of allies. It's in debt. Its population has fled the conflict. It's a corrupt, untrustworthy, anti-democratic government. There's a large section of the population that actually sides with the enemy. These are facts. And Ukraine's position was untenable. And America pushed Ukraine into a war with Russia, and it has destroyed the country. And everybody who cheered it on destroyed Ukraine. New polling shows significant Ukrainian support for diplomacy to end the war. And that's the last lib argument. But Ukrainians want to fight till they're all dead. They'd rather be dead than Russian. The narrative of totally unified Ukrainian opinion is premised on polls from the earliest days of the war showing nearly unanimous Ukrainian support for the government and its handling of the war effort. The seeming consensus has steadily eroded since the peak of Ukraine's battlefield successes in 2022, when 70% of survey respondents affirmed that Ukraine should continue fighting until it wins the war. That number dropped to 60% in the summer of 2023. Polling since the failure of Ukraine's 2023 offensive shows 44% of Ukrainians favor entering into talks with Russia And only 48%, still a plurality, but notably no longer a majority, believe Ukraine should fight on. Other recent polling shows that even in Kiev, where Ukrainian elite and bureaucracy is concentrated, political investment in the war effort is at its highest, complete confidence in the Ukrainian victory is weakening. Tellingly, recent surveys, including a new poll from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, suggest that the share of Ukrainians open to a negotiated settlement has dramatically risen over the past year, and if present trends hold, is well on the way to becoming a majority-held view. Why is this? Because elite Ukrainians can no longer dodge the draft. Ukrainians living abroad and posting on Twitter are being forced to go back to Ukraine as their passports and visas expire, and then they get drafted. And then they get barely any training before forced to the front. Everybody in Ukraine is realizing it's a fucking meat grinder. It's not a video game. It's not glorious to die in a random Russian shelling attack. Ukraine's campaign to replenish its war-weary troops is ramping up and should fill personnel gaps on the front line in the coming weeks, according to Ukrainian officials, soldiers, and military analysts. The mobilization push has so far not significantly bolstered Ukrainian forces on the battlefield. Many conscripts are still competing the weeks-long training process that have yet to reach the front, and some recruits who have arrived are not physically fit for combat. But several brigades deployed on the battlefield have reported an increase in the number of conscripts they have received in recent weeks. They said they were hoping that the influx of soldiers would help Ukraine stabilize the front line this summer. The other thing is conscripts typically have less morale and less willingness to fight than volunteers. People that got kidnapped off the street and forced to the front at gunpoint are more likely to run away. Nazar Voitenkov, press officer of the 33rd Mechanized Brigade, said on Friday that his unit had received more newbies this month than they had in the beginning of the year. And today I was told there were more coming to us, he added. Ukrainian authorities have declined to share conscription figures. This is how you know they're winning, chat. Ukraine realizes that Trump may pull support, so now they're moving quickly. Crazy to think they could have done this 2 years ago and saved countless lives. So I think this is the Ukrainian foreign minister. Alexander Severskin, the deputy commander for Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, which was rushed to help Ukrainian troops in the area, told a Ukrainian news outlet that the disorderly withdrawal led to unnecessary casualties. Attacks, first and foremost, those brigades have weakest command and organization. When a poorly managed crew is attacked, it can't hold, he wrote on Facebook. Ukraine has faced its similar battlefield challenges in recent months, with its troops either trapped in chaotic retreats or bungling rotations that allow Russia to quickly seize land. Guys, where's the CNN coverage in this? In Avdiivka, an eastern city that Russia captured in February, Ukrainian soldiers said a failure to execute an orderly withdrawal cost lives and led to a capture of many soldiers. Franz Stefan Gadi, a Vienna-based military analyst, said rotations are usually the most dangerous moment for an army because they leave positions only partially manned as soldiers pull back. Mr. Gady said the ever-present surveillance drones hovering over the battlefield have made these rotations extremely difficult to carry out, particularly for Ukraine, whose defensive lines are already thin because of manpower shortages. Russia often tries to attack in advance just as Ukraine conducts rotations, Mr. Gady said. This is good. I'm glad this is going on. Another good Joe Biden success story.
She has no idea who Mike is.
Mike. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. But you may want to start changing your ways. Change your ways. Or changing your name.